Hello and welcome to Remote Island Reels, where I ask other YouTubers to imagine they've been stranded on a desert island with 5 of their favourite movies, 1 television show, and 1 album. This episode features Brietannia, who makes videos on law, politics, and social issues. Your current Discord and Twitter profile is Marina Horror. Why?
I would rather explain that to you off mic, although we've done a bit of a debrief. There is a reason for that, and the reason I picked it is I was looking to discover who could see it, and it's a bit of an inside joke between people who know me, but I'll explain that later.
I can cut that out if you don't want that
No,
to be
that's absolutely fine. I should have given you the full debrief beforehand, but yeah, it's a bit of an inside joke. Like, I think only 2 people I know have got on it, but yes.
Well, I've only seen 1 movie with Maureen O'Hara in, and that was Dance Girl Dance, and I don't remember a single frame from that movie. Are you a fan?
Yes, in the way I am. The one that stands out for me is, I know she did a lot of work with John Wayne, but the one which stands out for me is Lisbon. That's the one that stands out for me, but she really was the icon of like early Technicolor, which is coincidental that I haven't picked her for any of these films on this list.
Yeah, so I asked you to come up with 5 of your favourite films to be washed upon a desert island with. We usually go in ascending order, so what is your 5th place for 5th favourite movie?
So if we go on the 5th place one, I'll just start with the order I've written them down. We will go straight into Terminator 2.
Terminator 2, so what did you like about it?
For me, it's like, Terminator 2, I think, is one of the best action/thrillers of the 1990s. If you look at what it was from the previous film, which was kind of pure thriller, Terminator 2 looks at the foundations of what made Terminator 1 great and built upon that. And I think you look at the action set pieces in the film, it's just an incredible watch and exhilarating.
Yeah, I have seen the original one. I wasn't really that bothered about it. It's like an okay film. But then the second one, I really liked it because it was it's like a smart action film. Usually, action films are pretty mindless. You know, there's like 20 minutes of setup, and then the rest of the movie is just guns and fights and car chases. But I don't know, Terminator, the 2 films in the series, there were only 2, they set up that quite well, where there's plot and substance to the films, as well as cool action stuff. Like, I love the car chase, the truck chase, where it's Arnie on the bike, and then the evil Terminator in the truck.
Yeah, the T-1000, and it's like, when you picked up on like being a smart action film, it's like there's a really good part in it when they try and humanize Arnie's character, the T-800, where Connor tries to get him to smile and he's awkward at smiling.
Yeah,
and it's just really funny watching the Terminator try and do quips like when he's not good at them. We had this ruthless killing machine in number 1, who Sarah Connor is like dead scared of and doesn't trust, trying to crack smiles, and for some reason I just found that really funny.
Yeah, when he's getting him to say all the catchphrases, and then he eventually uses them to become the iconic Terminator phrases like Hasta la vista. When did you first see it?
Being born in the 90s, I would have probably have seen it in the late 90s or early 2000s. It probably registered most with me when I was a teenager, when I could properly digest and understand what was going on. It's kind of natural for all the films I've listed. I've had to go back and watch them in my teens and 20s. But it's like, there's something about it that was struck, and it's like, the main thing for me was the quality of the effects. And I know now it's a 30-year-old film, so some of the effects don't stand up, but you consider like, for the T-1000, the evil Terminator, how advanced those effects were for 1991. It really did feel like a milestone for cinema at the time.
I love the bit where he pulls off his hand. Like, that doesn't look too... He rips open his skin and he pulls off his hand to reveal a robot arm underneath. I thought that was really advanced for the 90s, I guess.
Yeah.
Maybe it looked even better when you're on like VHS and you can only see like when everything's all blurry and fuzzy and stuff when you're on a VHS or a low-res DVD. Maybe it looks even better.
I think it's a rarity of a sequel being better than its previous film. Yeah. As you said with the other Terminator films, just stop at Terminator 2. Like, Terminator 2 is a very good action film. It has good thrilling elements of its pacing. There's no need to worry about Terminator 3 and all the hogwash which has come since.
So your fourth place film.
In terms of how I've listed them, The School of Rock.
Yes, I had not seen this one before, which seems a bit weird because it's like one of those films that everyone's already seen. What did you think about it?
I would have seen it in cinemas. This came out in 2003, so yeah, I do remember seeing it. Maybe it stands out for like that, but it's like it's one of those films I've had to go back to understand a lot more because it's typical of like these comedy films which are geared towards families. Sometimes they just fly over your head.
Yeah,
It's like, especially a lot of the pop culture references. I get them
yeah,
now, looking at them from
yes,
the
yes.
2000s lens as an adult, but not as a kid.
The main thing that stood out to me was it's kind of like Ferris Bueller's Day Off in that Jack Black is definitely the bad guy in this film.
Yeah,
Like, obviously, yeah, he's like the main character, and he's in the end he turns out to have improved everyone's lives, but he's exploiting a bunch of kids for his own selfish ends to make a thing, and he's interrupting their education just to win a band contest. That was just funny to me.
I mean, it is, when you do think about it, it's kind of bad. But like, yeah, he's living at his friend, and he's angry with his friend's girlfriend, who rightfully wants him to pay rent or move
Yeah,
out.
she did nothing wrong in that movie, honestly. I mean, she's obviously the bad guy, and we did want her to fail, but there was nothing there that any normal person would not have done, I guess.
We're rooting for the bad guy, but Jack Black himself is, I think he's a very good comedic actor for these type of films.
Yeah.
I mean, especially in the 2000s. I know he did like *Tenacious D* after this, which is very different in tone.
Yeah.
But like, I think the chemistry he has with a lot of the children in the film is really good. Like, I remember the first thing he said to the children was, "Do you know what a hangover is?" And obviously, when I was like 6 or 7 in the cinema when it came out, like, I didn't know what the hell a hangover was.
Yeah.
Now I'm sitting in my 20s. I know how he feels, but
Yeah.
it's really, it's really funny how he has these very selfish motivations. The way a lot of the characters interact, and amongst the children themselves, they have like the diversity of characters. Some of them do feel a bit like a stereotype. Like you have the boy who is quite effeminate, and
Yeah, and they put him as the costume designer, which I thought,
Yeah.
well, it is an early 2000s film, so
yeah,
it is a product of its time, but still a bit
Yeah.
sussy if you ask me.
yeah, you have. It's a bit like especially when you have like this time period, you just have to appreciate like the social standards aren't the same as we have now, especially as it's exactly 20 years old this year. But I think again, it's really good at connecting with all its characters. I even think like the supporting teacher casts are pretty good. Like you have the grumpy headmistress who's actually quite down to earth once he's unable to break her skin. I also think the payoff is really good at the end. Like I think all these films I've picked have pretty solid endings. Spoilers, sadly, they don't fulfill Jack Black's goals in this, but like you see the end credit scenes and what happens afterwards. There's a good resolution for everyone. It's a good, feel good ending.
You don't have. It's a bittersweet ending, which is the best kind of ending because you don't want them to. If every movie ended with the protagonist getting exactly what they wanted, well, there'd be no stakes.
Yeah,
he set out to get a materialistic award at a ceremony, and he would, stop at nothing, including exploiting children to get it. And then in the end, he realized actually the award doesn't matter. It's all about the friends we made along the way.
Yeah, it's a very like child film message in a way. Although the ending isn't, they happily lived ever after. It's the bittersweetness is probably the good part of it. Like,
Yeah,
he doesn't get the full motivation, but yeah, there's a good resolution for everyone. And I also think as well, on a personal level, it introduced me a lot to like artists like Blondie and Led Zeppelin. So like it's had a big influence on that side of my life as well. So it's kind of interesting how that film has had an impact.
right, cool. So your third movie.
So Moonlight, I think, is a really fascinating film because in some respects, what can film do as a medium that other mediums can't do well? It can really tell a deep story, sometimes a very dark and heavy story of things we can't experience. And I think Moonlight does that fantastically. Like,
Yes.
I know at the time it was critically acclaimed. It did really well at the Academy Awards and stuff like that. And deservedly so. I think the topic is very heavy because it's like the life of a young gay man growing up in the epidemic in the 1980s in Liberty City in Miami. It's believed to be based along a lot of the creator's own personal experiences. I just think, as a film, in the general picture, it's so well done.
Yeah, I mean, I am white, I am heterosexual, I live completely a million miles away. I've never had anything to do with drugs, but and I could still sympathize with this young man because of the power of this film.
For me, I am white, I'm trans and LGBT and all that good stuff. And it's like, for me, it's how well it's done. It's like the relationship Chiron has with Kevin going throughout the film and his own things he says early on. It's like he says to Juan, his the older guy who discovers him, like, do you know what an F word is? And he's meant to be like 10 or 11 in the chapter called Little. And because it's clear that he's been called the F word by people around him in his life. And Juan goes like, yeah, I do know what it is. And the thing what got me the most with the relationship between Juan and Chiron in the early parts, Chiron in the early parts of the film, is he teaches him how to swim, and that central theme of water becomes incredibly key to the film. Like it seems to have all those big set pieces happen around the beach specifically, and it's the clever use of color I see there, where the emotional scenes, especially around the water, you get that blue tint, which is referenced to in the film itself.
Apparently, the stereotype of black people being unable to swim is largely true. It's much lower than other demographics in being able to swim. And I think teaching him how to swim is one of the most important things you can do. I mean, if you've got this theme of water, then teaching him how to swim is being taught how to embrace this world of water that he lives in. He's teaching him how to exist in this world where he doesn't really fit.
Yeah, and I suppose it comes back to like the old saying of like sink or swim, doesn't it? It's like, I noticed as well, if you look at like the scenes, especially in the early scenes when he's in the house of his mum, and obviously he has
the wallpaper is blue, yeah.
But sometimes it seems to go a bit redder. It could be just my eyes, but I'm convinced they use that subtle use of colour and to just try and portray and tell the story a bit more.
Well, yeah, when his mother, you don't actually hear her shout it, but you see her mouth the words. The lighting in that is bright red, which contrasts with the cool blues of the house, as it usually is. When he goes to Juan's house, his house is bright white, which sets off which is the opposite of the darker blues that define his regular house.
I think it's really cleverly done. As you see the chapters progress, there's so much in the film it portrays, like especially in like the middle chapter where he develops his relationship with his friend and his love interest Kevin, and like how like homophobia is in this part of the world at this time in history amongst this, and his own strugglings with that, and especially in like the final chapter where he becomes this drug dealer. He's at this time he's physically a bigger guy, he's well built, he's the almost spoil touch of the film, but it's like he's now an ex-con and he's a very hyper masculine dude. But that ending for me is just something, because you get to see this big masculine guy who's in many respects an apex of like toxic masculinity in a way, have that little window of vulnerability when Kevin sits there and says, things have gone tough in my life, but overall I'm happy, and as a parent now I feel fulfilled. And you just see this big guy just break down in tears. It hits so hard in a way. It's just like the actors did an incredible job, I think.
Yes, I did enjoy the acting for all three chapters. The character who plays Chiron, really well done in both three parts. Like obviously child actors are a nightmare to work with, and he was still a believable child.
For me, I like conclusions. So for me, it's like the third one is probably the best, because I think that conclusion is really, really sweet, considering everything we know what's gone on in this young man's life. And just to show that vulnerability and just to end with, like, it is a bittersweet ending in a way, because, like, it's not like they lived happily ever after. We just see them embrace, and that's the close. But it's just like, what a sweet way to end the film. And it's just, that hits so hard, like, this emotional roller coaster you've been on with this young man's life.
I don't know, he's no longer hiding from himself, because did he take his gold teeth out for the final scene? Because I'll double check that before I cut this out of the final recording. But he's really has taken off his persona as this manly drug dealer, and he's become he's bared his real teeth at the end of the film, which I thought was quite a poetic way of describing things.
It really cuts down, because we've been on this emotional roller coaster with him, and to see like this hardened big drug dealer dude just show that vulnerability of the sweet boy he always was, and like be able to reconnect with his friends and his love interests is just, it's a really sweet way to end the film. I think these big emotional moments, and there's times in the film like where sometimes Sharon just cracks. There's times where he is able to ride through the storm, so to speak. But yeah, the water symbolism is really central, I feel, to the film.
Yeah, he washes his face several times in the film as well.
Yeah, I think that use of water as symbolism is incredible in the film, and it really just adds that extra bit to it.
Your next choice
is Toy Story 3. So it's always weird, because I think people would always pick 1 or 2 first.
Yeah, I mean, Toy Story 1 has got a perfect 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. Toy Story 2 has got 100%, and then Toy Story 3 has only got 99%. So what a letdown! Yeah. What a pathetic end to the trilogy.
Not worth the ink the ticket is printed on. Or I mean, because obviously, like for me, it's clearly a trilogy. I refer to it as the Andy trilogy, because like Toy Story 4 obviously takes post Andy.
Yeah, I've not actually seen the 4th one.
Neither have I, and I refuse to see it. I'm not denying it's a bad film. It's just, for me, because the way 3 ended, don't think you can. And the main reason I picked this in part was because of that ending.
It's satisfying, yes.
The film itself it's a solid Toy Story film. It's a Toy Story film. It's solid in what it does. We get the common themes of like brotherhood and friendship between like Woody and Buzz in their conflict interest. I don't think the villain in this one is as compelling as like Sid was in Toy Story 1.
I have sympathy for Sid because he wasn't really doing anything wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. I mean, he was just being like a kid, basically.
He was being an artist in his depressed, horrible lifestyle with his alcoholic father. He was creating these works of sculptural art. He didn't know they were alive, but I digress.
I mean, because obviously the bad guy in this one, I did jot his name down.
Lotso-Hugging-Bear.
Lotso. Yeah, Lotso-Hugging-Bear. The thing is, it's kind of interesting how, like, because obviously it's a very coming-of-age story. Andy he's now going to university, so he's moving on with his life. He's clearing up his room, and the thing what's hit that hardest for me, him growing old, is he had his old dog like walk across the screen, and its belly is now scraping the floor. And it's very much clear that Andy is now moving on with his life. And obviously, like, toys you grow up with, but once you get into like your teen years and beyond, you don't really tend to use your toys much anymore.
No.
So we have this idea of like where the toys are going to go, and they go to the daycare center, and Lotso comes in, and he's like, oh, like, this is a wonderful place, there's always children here, you're going to get played with, you're going to get well looked after. And where he lives looks like a paradise. And it's funny because it's where Barbie and Ken meet for the first time as well. In that, and it's like, so the toys feel kind of relaxed, but it turns out that's not necessarily as true as it seems on the surface. They go into like the younger daycare centers, and those toys get thrown about badly. It's clever. I think he's a cleverly done villain in the sense that he's able to come across as charming and kind of relaxing, especially with his southern accent. Seems to have that warmth, what strikes with people. But then all of a sudden he just has this sinister side that flips, and he's a complete control freak. And it turns out that these toys are actually more in a prison than they are in a daycare center. Just
when did you first see it? Because I saw this in cinema when it came out.
So did I.
I especially liked the Mr. Potato Head lore that they've released, that they hinted to, where it's not the body that makes the Mr. Potato Head, it's the body parts that make the Mr. Potato Head.
Yeah, I remember that. And Spanish Buzz Lightyear.
Yes.
Because it's just silly, but all of a sudden Buzz Lightyear just goes into Spanish mode and he becomes a salsa dancer, like trying to wow Jessie, out of all the characters. And they're trying to sneak him out as well, which is really funny because he's the more competent one in terms of like all these escapes, and they kind of can't rely on him. They've got to rely mostly on Woody in this one.
Yeah. And then the ending of this film, you said you had something to say on that. I don't know if you've seen the thing where somebody took the bit when they're all about to be incinerated in the big trash burner, and somebody made a cut of the film where it fades at that to the end credits, and then they showed the film to their grandparents.
Yeah, I mean, if that's how they ended it for a kids' film, that would have been pretty savage. To teach these like young children, like, no, sometimes this happens in life. Your toys get incinerated.
Someday you will die. Yes.
Like, it would be a very dark way to end it. But the ending we got, the canonical ending, we should say. And Woody wants to go to University of Andy, which is the entire motivation of trying to get Woody back to Andy's. But obviously Woody is the one who writes the note to take the toys to this specific girl at this address from the daycare center. And Andy's just doing the thing where he goes through his toys and just like explains to the girl what they are and like shows how to play and stuff like that. And he all of a sudden just goes down and gets Woody. And there's that moment on his face where he hesitates for a moment and she grabs him and goes, "Cowboy, snake in my boot." And it's just like, Andy stands there with that idea of like, it's really him passing over his childhood to someone else. And you can see him hesitate for a moment because obviously like he's developed an emotional attachment to a toy. He doesn't know Woody is a live being. He
only sees it as through his memories.
Ending, it does feel like, especially, it resonated more when I got a bit older because like...
Yeah, because then you eventually grow old and you give up your toys.
Yeah, and it's just like that passing of the guard, and it's like, you do have, like, to an extent, an emotional attachment to essentially what are inanimate objects. And I think that's not just me, I think that's pretty much every single person who has existed for quite a long period of time.
I mean, all my childhood toys are still in the attic. And what my mum does every year is that when they have, you know, with them charity drives at church where they give toys to like Brazilians or Africans or whatever who can't afford them, I get like 5 minutes to go out to, you know, look at them again for the first time in 10 years. I don't know, every single time, even though I'm a grown-ass man, every single time I still feel a bit, you know, sad that I'm parting ways with this toy. Your final film? Yes, your final film.
I mean, this one is a film, I saw it, like, for the first time when I was, like, 16.
I was 16 when I saw it for the first time as well.
I watched it when I was, like, 21 or 22 again. And I watched it recently with a friend because she's never seen it. And I said, like, it is an intense film and you may not get it on your first watch. And that film is obviously Pulp Fiction. There are elements which don't look great now in hindsight. But it's like, for me, watching it for the first time, it was accelerated fun. It's a very like dark film with a lot of its darker scenes, but there was just that period in my life when I was like 16 that I just switched off and just watched it and just had a blast, basically. And there's still that part of me in there when I see it again. I have that. My
unpopular opinion is I think that this movie is like, it's okay. I know loads of people hate me for this. All my friends hate me for this because, you know, how can you not like Pulp Fiction? I just didn't grab me for some reason.
The thing I think a lot of people get lost in it is how it's structured. The structure is so different from what we've seen before. Being chopped up in the way it does, how it kind of has to all make sense. So I think a lot of people who don't like it or don't get it tend to feel like the structure overwhelms them in a way, and I do get that.
I did Google this once, you know, has anyone made a cut of Pulp Fiction where all the scenes are in order? And it turns out that some university PhD students or whatever made a cut of the film where it was in chronological order, where all the scenes happened as they did. And then they showed it to a group of people who have never seen it before. they showed the full film, the real cut of the film, to a group who had never seen it before. Generally, people preferred the original version over the one where all the scenes are in chronological order. I don't know what that says about the film itself, but I thought it was interesting to note.
I mean, I think that's where a lot of people who aren't really sold on the film tend to come from. I'm not sure if that's your case particularly, but
it's been a while since I've last seen it, but I remember the Bruce Willis character didn't really grab me, and he's like a good the central third of the film. Maybe I need to give it a rewatch. Maybe I need to give it another chance. But yeah,
I think so because I mean, don't get me wrong, the opening is accelerating, and I think Samuel L. Jackson as Jules right at the beginning, that first scene when he quotes Ezekiel 25:17, which I believe is a more modified version of the chapter.
It's not a real verse. Yeah, I think it says something completely different in the real version. Exactly.
Yeah, because I did check that out because I was like, I'm pretty sure that's not in the Bible.
Yeah, God would not say that.
It's I mean, that becomes more prominent towards the end when he explains later on in the film. But it's for me, it's funny how they're walking through. They're talking about the guy who got crippled by Mr. Wallace for giving his wife a foot massage, and just the way he spouts off about John Travolta's character says how that scene is intimate. And Samuel L. Jackson, I think, in this film is in his element. I believe this was his breakout role.
Yeah, I think so.
And you can see why, because in his performance, he radiated in this. He was so good. They go on about a foot massage being intimate, and there's just something he says about there's nothing like putting forgive me for saying this, and you might cut this, but putting your tongue in the holiest of holes. And I just remember just slapping my thigh and just bursting out in laughter every time without fail. That opening part is just so good, and that just sells you onto the rest of the film. I also think the next part, especially when it's now with Mr. Wallace's wife and John Travolta's character, Mia, who in many respects becomes a bit of an icon in the 90s. I know she's featured on the promotional poster for it.
Yeah, there's in the wall of every university student's dormitory wall.
I mean, I thought she was phenomenal in her role as well. That scene at the diner is kind of iconic, although it's kind of funny watching Vincent, who's not really all there, and she's just talking to him, and you can just tell he's not really paying attention.
And you'll notice that when she talks about she used to be an actress on a TV show, the plot of the TV show that she talks about is the plot of Kill Bill.
I mean, I could have put that on the list as well, but we'll stick with Pulp Fiction. I think what happens after that, the overdose scene in itself is iconic, and that's just...
I mean, that was a scene that really stuck out to me when I watched it.
Because, I mean, it's been referenced tons of times in pop culture, but it is iconic in its own right. And I think her and Travolta's character, Vincent, do have a good dynamic in that. And, yeah, I mean, when I watched it, recently, and, she was going to do a line of what we believe to be as cocaine and happened to be powdered heroin. And she had the overdose. For some reason, my heart just kind of skipped a beat. It really hit hard. And then I know what's coming and stuff like that. And I mean, I can see where some people do fall off, because I think compared to what the start is, where it bolts out of the gate like a horse, like a thoroughbred horse just running. And I do think, to an extent, you have a point with Bruce Willis's character. The film does seem to slow down a bit, and he is quite central to it. And I think it only picks up with him towards the end, when it comes to his interactions with Mr. Wallace, where he's being chased by him, and then coincidentally becomes his savior from, that not so great scene in hindsight.
So, what did you think was in the box?
Honestly, I don't know.
I don't know why I thought this, but the thing that always jumped in my head was it's the most powerful gun in the world. And I believe it's a reference to an older film from the 50s. I don't remember what the name was, but in it, a woman opens a box with a uranium bomb in, or a very powerful piece of uranium, and she ends up burning to death. She looks at it, and then the sight of this powerful atomic weapon burns her alive. And that's what it's a reference to. So I thought it was just a very powerful gun for some reason. Though I have heard other interpretations that it's Wallace's soul
Yeah, I could see that.
There's always a bit of fantasy in a Tarantino thing, like a little flick of fantasy.
I do think the film does comedy quite well, like in its
Yeah.
very slapstick, dark way, like
Mm.
literally having to clean out a dead body because Vincent accidentally shot someone in the head in a car,
Yeah.
and they've got to clean the car, and they're dressed in that stupid outfit so it make them look like tourists. Even the ending scene, which kind of funny how the ending actually brings us back to the introduction with the hold up in the
The diner, yeah.
and again, I just think Samuel L. Jackson in that part is just so central to it. The way he's just like, I've been saying this phrase to people killing them all my life, but really, I don't really care anymore. So put your stuff away, leave me alone. I'm walking out of here. And I just thought, what a funny way to end the film.
So I'm asked for your TV show. Which TV show would you take to the island?
Oh boy. In terms of TV show, I mean, I'm not going to say the one in my head which gives me recency bias, but I will go with one which I've only seen on one watch through. But I've tried watching it again. It does get tougher to watch, especially how you see it in a different light. And that show is BoJack Horseman.
Rick and Morty for smart people who think they're too smart for Rick and Morty.
Indeed. I mean, I think for BoJack, there's several reasons. One, I think it does drama and suspense quite well. And for me, it feels like a milestone in adult animation. It shows that, yes, you can tell a compelling, emotionally driven story through the medium of animation. And BoJack Horseman does humor quite well as well, be it visual humor, be it tongue twisters and stuff like that, and puns. It's a very clever written show. I must admit, it does get harder to watch on the second watch through because you do look at, especially BoJack, in a very different light. And I'm not sure if that's intentional from the creators, because like as you go on, you tend to kind of root for him because he's the central guy. But there's a period where you watch him and you just kind of lose interest in him.
And what would you say your album was?
If I had to pick one album, it's The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. I'm not sure if you've ever been treated to that. It's an R&B album from the 1990s, well, hip hop as well.
Can't say I've ever heard it before. Who's it by?
By Lauryn Hill. It is.
Oh, right.
It would have been released in 1998, I think. For me, in terms of what it is, she has been sampled throughout hip hop throughout the time. It genuinely is one of the best hip hop / rap albums ever. Like what she has done in terms of musical style, in terms of how she's been able to land a lot of her lyrics. It's kind of sad because it was the height of her career, and pretty much everything else after that just went off the rails for her. But in terms of an album, I find it very, 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 very hard to find something that rivals it.
I was expecting a Ariana Grande album, if I'm honest with you.
Indeed, yes.
I'm still not 100% sure if that's like ironic or if you actually are a big Ariana Grande fan.
It's not ironic.
I thought so.
In terms of like, because I do have a video planned later on, way later on. I'm in the middle of writing it about Ariana Grande. I reckon it's going to be about 15 to 25,000 words. And it's like, I know for a fact, in terms of like Spotify listening charts, I've been on the top 0.01% for the last 4 years. So if you need any more, if you need any more clarification that it's not a meme, there you go.